Hey everyone, Micah here with EbikeSchool.com, and today we're going to do a fun solar project on my electric mini truck. Now I've already done a lot of upgrades to it, and you might see that I've got the new knobby tires on it. The hubcaps are missing, I've got a surprise for that. I've done a few other projects on it so far, some little upgrades here and there that I'm going to cover in another video. It's coming up on a year since I got the truck, so I'm going to do a 1-year update on everything that's changed. But today, I really want to take a solar panel, put it on top of the cab here, and get sort of a trickle charging solar setup. I've got a couple solar panels we're going to pull out, two 50-watt Renogy panels. One's a rigid panel, one's a flexible panel. So I'm going to play around with them, see which one I like better for that position. But basically the goal is to just create this situation where when the truck's driving around or when it's parked outside, it's basically replenishing each day the amount of energy that it's using. So with any luck, I won't have to plug it into the wall very often because it'll get most or all of its power from the sun. But it is super hot here in Florida, so I think we're gonna pull this into the garage and do some work in there. I'm again on my parents' property here in Florida, so we're gonna use my dad's garage. Why don't you follow me inside and let's get started on this project. So I've got these two panels here. Both of these are Renegys. I figure it's like a name brand in solar panels, so I'd go with something good because I want to do this once and do it right. This is the rigid panel. It's about 7 pounds, and this is about a 3-pound flexible panel. And at first I thought maybe the flexible panel would be a better option, but now I'm thinking that if it's like always vibrating, it might not be good for the panel over, you know, like a year of just shaking around. And I'm really liking the frame. It's got like this nice aluminum frame on the rigid one. And the size is also a little bit smaller. So I think this one might be the better way to go. So my plan is to put it up on top of the cab like this. And there's no real good way to mount it up here, at least not yet. So I'm gonna have to fabricate something. But we've already got these nice sort of like luggage rack rails here. So I'm thinking to put a couple of cross members across the top here and then just mount the panel on top of those. And that also should give me enough clearance because I've got the sunroof up here and it actually pops up for ventilation. Ideally, I'd get like the same kind of steel or something, but I don't have any like steel tube on hand. But there is some PVC here in my dad's garage that I think will actually just work better and it'll be easier to work with. I don't even have to weld it. So I think what I'm gonna do is just sort of cut some you know, like half rounds into it, just like you do if you were mitering steel tubing to weld on here. And then I can just sort of slide that in. So let's play around with that a little bit and see how that works. And the answer is that it works great. After we cut the pipe, they popped in with a tight fit, and I think it's going to give a very nice surface for mounting the panel. Plus, once they're painted black, they're really going to blend in. The nice thing is I can play with the angle of the panel too to get it positioned just how I want it. All right, so we've got the PVC painted black here, and to be honest, it really looks like these steel tubes. I think that's gonna blend in nicely. Just gotta kind of bang it in here. All right, so these are in here so tight that it feels like they're almost welded in, and they actually really look like the same tubing here. So I'm really liking the way this looks so far. And at first I was thinking maybe I would just leave it, you know, flat across the top here, but I also have the option to rock this one back and then kind of angle the panel down. And I think that might be the better way to go here. I think that if it's sitting flat and it's raining out and water pools on top and you get that kind of like dirty, dusty water, when it dries, you're gonna get that nasty grime across the entire top of the panel. But if I leave the panel angled, then all the water is gonna kind of sheet down to the bottom. It's not gonna leave as much of a dirty surface that you occasionally have to clean off. So I think angling is actually gonna be the better way to do it. Let me grab the panel here and see how this looks. Probably should have remembered to bring it up here with the PVC. All right, so yeah, I think this is gonna be perfect. And I can basically connect right through here into the aluminum frame of the panel here, and that's gonna be great. In fact, the panel has this really nice and thick aluminum frame that gave me a lot of meat to create a custom mounting solution for these wide tubes. I ended up drilling a couple holes, and then I used an end mill and a Dremel to connect them into a slot for hose clamps. Of all the power tools I use on a regular basis, nothing quite gives me a "this could go wrong in a heartbeat" feeling as a Dremel. You'd think an angle grinder would be the one, but the unassuming little handheld Dremel just seems like it wants to go rogue in a much more intimate way. Anyways, from there, my dad let me raid his miscellaneous hardware buckets, and we found the perfect hose clamps for the job, and also added a bit of foam under the panel just to provide a little bit more shock absorption. I don't know if you remember, but the suspension isn't exactly plush in this truck, and so that panel is going to get some serious bounce testing. Other than the mystery clunking and the suspension that could use some existence, I would say that I am really quite excited about this truck and pleasantly surprised with how well it works and just how much of a real vehicle it is.
Okay, I think your viewers are going to throw up.
After that, I had to figure out how to run the wiring through the roof and into the cab's interior. Removing the sunroof cover on the inside let me get into the headliner, and also revealed that the cooling fans are actually electronics fans like you'd find on a CPU, which is just one more part that would actually be pretty easy to replace if it ever broke, and shows that there are a lot of pretty generic components on this truck, which is nice from a replacement standpoint. Next, we further disassembled the interior panels of the truck, and again my dad was super helpful here because he has several more decades of experience than I do pulling cars apart. You guys remember my dad, right? Of both Changley truck fame and solar kayak fame. He uses the truck more than I do these days since I've left it on my parents' property, and so he went to town pulling it apart. I was a bit worried about just yanking plugs out, but the plastic plugs that hold the panels on the doors and interior seem to just pop out, and they let us wiggle some of the 2-core wire back there. We were also able to get down into the space behind the charge port, which has a little convenient access door that I could feed the wire through after cutting out a little notch for it. That made it easy to hide the wire out of sight behind the seats, and you don't see it running through the cab, so it still looks all nice and stock. My dad might have more automotive experience, but electronics is all me, so I had to solder on some MC4 connectors for the panel, which also means that I can upgrade this at any time by simply plugging in a higher power solar panel. Then up top we drilled a hole for the wire to pass through, making it high enough that water wouldn't pool around it in the housing for the sunroof. And then that hole can easily be sealed with silicone caulking around the wire. Back down in the backside of the charging port, I stole the existing wires off the secondary charge port that I don't use. I don't know why that upper port is there, and I have no idea what connector fits it, but I only used the lower port for my charger. Following the upper port's wires back to the wiring harness under the bed, I can see that both ports simply flow into the main positive and negative buses of the truck, so I hijacked the wires to the redundant port, and I connected them to the wire that will come from the output of my charge controller. This MPPT charge controller, which I mounted on the back wall of the cab, is programmable, so I'm able to dial in the correct output voltage to charge my 60-volt batteries, and it does the hard work of converting my approximately 16 to 18-ish volts from the solar panel on top into something usable by my battery. Again, I'll have links to all these parts in the description below this video. So that should be it. I've got all of my connections made. The panel's putting out just over 12 volts with the lights here in the garage. It's not enough to actually start up the charge controller. So now I guess the last step is to back the truck out, get it into the sun, and see what happens. All right, the moment of truth. So we just roll back into the sun, and I can see I'm getting 21 volts in from the panel, but there's no current flowing. It says my output is at 65.6 volts, which is the current voltage of the battery. It might be actually because I still have this programmed for the bike, which I had at 54.6 volts. So let me try bumping this up to like 70 volts or so, which should be just shy of the full voltage of the battery on this truck. 67, 8, 9. Right, I'm gonna set it at 70 volts, which is not full for this battery, but just to be safe. All right, we're at 70 volts. All right, now the current's kicking on. All right, so we're up to 0.5 amps coming out of the battery at 65.9 volts. So let's do a little calculation to see what that wattage is. 32.3 watts. So right now we're getting about 32 watts out of this thing. Half an amp of charge. Now keep in mind the actual charger for this truck is like 10 amps or so. So this is charging at 5% of the rate of the actual charger, which is not very much, but it is in fact trickle charging. And that's kind of the whole goal here, right? Is that every time the truck is out in the sun like this, it's just slowly trickle charging the battery. So we're getting still, about 0.48, 0.49 amps. It's staying pretty steady at 65.9 volts. So it seems like it is working. It'll be interesting to leave it here for several hours and see what the voltage rises to see, how much charge we can get in a day of sun. And another interesting thing that my dad just pointed out is to try turning the truck around, because right now I've got the panel kind of angled north. I should really angle it into the sun. So let's see how that affects things here. Though we're just getting a cloud here, but let's try turning it around a little bit. All right, so I should have it about perfectly angled into the sun. Let's see what that did. And of course, we've got a cloud over the sun right now, so we've dropped down to about 0.2 amps. All right, we're up to about 0.24, 0.28, the cloud's going away, 0.36. I think the highest we got before was 0.48 or 0.49. And of course, in the most dramatic moment is when my wireless microphone's battery ran out, so I'll have to voice over this part, but you can watch as the current keeps climbing as the cloud starts to dissipate. And we get up to about 0.53 amps here while it's still slightly cloudy. I let the truck sit out for several more hours, and eventually the highest I saw was 0.67 amps at 66.1 volts, giving me about 44 watts in midday sun. It could have been a bit higher at some point since I was just sort of checking back in on it every 20 minutes or so, but that's the highest I saw personally at any one point in time. Alright, so I have some updates. It's been about a day or so since I put the panel on. I let it charge all day yesterday. We went from about 65.7 volts up to 66.1 volts. And throughout the day, the power fluctuated between about 30 to 35-ish watts up to about 45 or 46 at the top end at the, right in the middle of the day with that August sun at high noon or so. And so to get 45, 46 watts out of a 50-watt panel is actually quite good, and that's very good performance. The meter that I have here doesn't actually show me how many watt hours that I've accumulated over the day. It's an instantaneous reading, but if I assume that I averaged about 35-ish watts throughout the day, also including a bit of cloud cover that went over, and I assume about 8 hours or so, that brings me right into about 240, 250 watt hours a day, which for this 6,000 watt hour battery equates to about 4 to 5% of the battery charge per day. Now, obviously that's very small, this isn't designed to really recharge an entire battery charge in a day. That's not what we made it for. The idea is that it just offsets the amount of use we do each day. And to be honest, last night, I drove it around, I did some drone filming. This morning we've been driving it around, we just moved some pallets around, and the voltage has dropped back down to about 65.7. So that's about right where it started yesterday morning before we put the panel on. And what that means is we've basically offset all of the energy usage that we used throughout last night and this morning with the charging we got yesterday. So in the first 24 hours of testing or so, basically it looks like the amount of energy we're getting is the amount of energy we're using in a day, which is pretty awesome because it means I'm just not gonna have to plug this thing in to charge very often, if at all. Now, a lot of people are gonna be curious what I spent on this thing, so let's go over the parts real quick. The panel here, this was my 50 watt Renogy panel. This thing cost about 75 bucks, sometimes get a little less if it's on sale. The meter in here that we put between the seats, that's also about 75 bucks. So just the two main parts were at $150. Then, you've got maybe 10 bucks in wiring, connectors, that sort of thing. So I think under 160, maybe $165, you can put this setup on. And of course, this is transferable to basically any electric vehicle. Not like a big electric car, because it's just really not going to make that much of a dent, but an electric bicycle, like I've done in a previous video. You can put it on an electric boat, like an electric kayak. I've done those in previous videos too. So it's pretty cool. This is actually a very simple setup, and it's just transferable to basically any sort of powered electric vehicle or electric device you can think of. So I'm excited soon to also do another video. It's going to be a 1-year update. I bought this truck last, I bought it, last summer, like June or July. It took until about September or so for it to get to the US. So I'm coming up on 1 year of actually owning it. I'm excited to do an update and let you guys know what's different. Like I mentioned, I've already put these new tires on it, but I've got some other things that we're going to be looking at, and also some other interesting little things, features, etc. I've discovered about the truck over time that I didn't even realize. So be looking for that video soon. That's going to be a longer thing, so I won't make it part of this one. But I am excited to bring you guys in closer and learn a little bit more about this truck, because to be totally honest, it's just been amazing. It's been an awesome little workhorse around the property here, and I couldn't be more pleased about this thing. So that's it for today. Thank you everyone for tuning in again. Last but not least, it's time to announce the winner of the giveaway from my last video. And the randomly selected commenter is
Shmuel Myers.
So congratulations. Just let me know which one of my books you'd like. You can choose from my first book, DIY Lithium Batteries, DIY Solar Power, The Ultimate Do-It-Yourself E-Bike Guide, or my latest book, The Electric Bike Manifesto. And anybody else who wants a chance to win one of my books for free, all you have to do is put a comment down below. You can say anything you like, and hopefully you'll be the randomly selected commenter at the end of my next video. If you don't want to wait that long, you can always find my books on Amazon. All right, thanks for watching everybody. We'll see you here next time.